Two stories, now essentially family classics, are making their way back to life with two new streaming films. Let's talk about Clifford the Big Red Dog and Home Sweet Home Alone. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews. Welcome to my spoiler-free reviews for the new family films Clifford the Big Red Dog, streaming on Paramount Plus or in theaters right now, and Home Sweet Home Alone, premiering on Disney Plus. And before we get started with those movies, I do want to welcome you into Dan Reviews It. Thank you for finding this video and my channel. Please consider subscribing down below there, trying to get to 1,000 subs before the end of 2021. We'd love to have you aboard as one of them. So let's launch right into these reviews. I was actually going to sort of split my time between the two, and I was even going to do Home Sweet Home Alone first, because I think it's probably the bigger of the two. But I have a lot more to say about that movie, so I think we're going to actually focus first on Clifford the Big Red Dog, make that sort of the appetizer before we get to the main course here with Home Sweet Home Alone. So this is the classic story that you probably already know about Clifford. A young girl's love for a tiny little red puppy named Clifford makes it grow to an enormous size. And this is, sort of an origin story of that tale. The girl in question here, played by Darby Camp, who I'm not super familiar with. She was one of the girls in Big Little Lies on HBO, which I think I saw like the first maybe 2 episodes of back in the day. But I really didn't recognize her. And then her uncle Casey, who is taking care of her while her mom's away, is played by Jack Whitehall, who is an English star. I wasn't really familiar with him, but he's basically stepping in for like a James Marsden type. He's certainly got that look, and he's got the mannerisms, and, if you weren't paying attention, you could think it was maybe James Marsden playing the lead adult role here. But anyway, a couple of issues come up along the way. Their gruff superintendent, played by David Alan Grier, not having any pets in the building, and really not a fan of this family anyway. But then you've got John Cleese as Mr. Birdwell, who is this magical animal rescuer who decides to give Clifford to Emily. And actually, at first they say, well, no, we can't take this. We can't have a pet in our apartment. But Clifford sneaks its way into Emily's backpack. And so there we go. So a couple of things about this movie. This is very family friendly. You can stream it right now on Paramount Plus, or you could see it in theaters, excuse me, where it was intended to be. This was going to have a big theatrical release, and then it was shuffled around several times, and then Paramount decided to do exactly what they did with the Paw Patrol movie a couple of months ago. Just put it in theaters. If people want to see it there, great. If not, hey, we'll get eyeballs on our Paramount Plus streaming service. So it is for free if you have Paramount as well. Tony Hale here also is the owner of this genetics company that feels they are the rightful owners of Clifford, and try and get Clifford back. So Emily's got some issues at school, and she's, being bullied by some of the popular girls and what have you. But once images of Clifford go viral, she obviously becomes a huge superstar at school. So this movie, I wanted to like. I'm not like a huge Clifford fan. The book was around when I was a kid, and I did read it. But when the show came out about, 20 years ago or something, I was, way too old for it at the time, and my nephews weren't born yet, so, they weren't, it wasn't their generation, it's not really my generation. So, other than the book, I don't really have any association with Clifford, but, look, it's a cute story. I always thought it was a cute dog, whatever. I'm not really much of a dog person, but it's fine. He's obviously adorable and whatever. But this movie goes to the most sort of basic humor values. There's a lot of fart and poop jokes about, how he's enormous. Like at one point he pees on a tree and it splashes back on the people. And the uncle's like, oh, wow, I don't want to be around when he does a number 2. Like, oh, ha, ha, ha. Like, 6-year-olds are going to find that real funny, I'm sure. But, I think the parents watching it with the kids are just going to want to die. It's the base story, of course, is cute. We know this. It's a classic at this point in kids' literature. But there's just nothing for the adults here. Even the adults that they will recognize: John Cleese, Tony Hale, Kenan Thompson is in it as a veterinarian, stinking up the screen. It's just there's nothing here to distinguish this from 20 other kids and their dogs movies. When you have something like Clifford, obviously there's going to be a lot of jokes based on his size, and we expect that. And there was a few of those, but all of the the messages about family and loving a dog and all of that you could see in 50 other movies about a boy or girl and their little puppy. So for me, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more Clifford specific stuff, and maybe not so much like the bullying at school, and the, oh, my mom's on the go and she's not around, uncle, homeless Uncle Casey, why don't you take care of me? He's like living in a Mack truck when we first meet him. Shades of like Uncle Buck, and like all these other movies with like the stupid uncle who comes through at the end, and no spoilers, but it's Clifford, you can probably figure it out. And they're just, of the recent kids movies that there's a few like that I've really kind of liked. I actually really enjoyed the Paw Patrol movie, and I know nothing about Paw Patrol, but I thought that was cute. They didn't do enough with this material. They did a few pratfall type jokes, but a lot of like that scatological humor about, oh, his dumps are going to be huge. Oh, he farted. Like, oh, that stinks, Clifford. Like, come on. I mean, it's almost as if a 5 or 6-year-old wrote this script. There's no character development. There's not much really of anything. But I will say, the girl is cute. Darby Camp, she does a good job in the role. She's a cute little actress. And she does sell it. Obviously, they're not using a real dog for this, so for a little girl to be able to play that well off of basically nothing, it is pretty impressive. I thought the CGI could have been a little better, but I'm sure this didn't have a huge budget. And on your small TV, if you watch it at home, I don't think you'll really notice. Now, if you see it in a theater, it might be a little bit worse for the wear. But again, the story is the story, and it's always going to be cute and kind of a home run with the kids and families alike. I just wish the script was like at all good. So I leave Clifford the Big Red Dog with a C-. All right, now the main course here: Home Sweet Home Alone. My God, what a turd of a movie. I usually reserve my sort of grades for the end. I kind of build up to things, and I'm not going to grade it, right this second. I'll grade it at the end, but I got to wear my heart on my sleeve for this one. It stinks. And I actually wasn't sure what to think of this when it was first announced. I thought, look, Home Alone is in my top 50 films of all time. I have seen it at least 20 times, probably. It is a holiday classic. And for me growing up, it came out when I was 12 or 13. It is the holiday classic in my lifetime that I go to by far the most. I don't really care for Christmas Story. I think Elf is fun. I don't mind Elf, but for me, Home Alone is cream of the crop, number one for Christmas. And when I heard it was announced, I thought, okay, well, look, it's been 25 years, more than that, 31 years now. And it has the little kid from Jojo Rabbit in it, who I think is adorable. And so I'm fine with that. What's his name? Archie Yates. He's cute. And he's funny. We saw this in Jojo Rabbit. So I thought, all right, look, maybe we could put a new spin on this. Let's give it the time of day. And then as we led up to it, and I don't watch trailers, so I still never saw the trailer for it, but the bile that was coming out for people with this movie, and how dare you remake it, and we don't want this, and it seemed different from the all-female Ghostbusters when that was announced, because that just seemed really like misogyny, and we hate women can't be Ghostbusters, that kind of thing. But for this, it's more of this movie is so personal to so many people. I think there's a whole list of movies that you just can't really remake. Back to the Future, if we're going to talk 80s and early 90s specific, Back to the Future is one of them. Goonies is one of them. But even going way back, like there's a reason The Wizard of Oz, whenever it gets remade, it's got some kind of different spin on it. Oz the Great and Powerful, Wicked, because we like these characters, but we don't want the same story over again, right? So this is a different, I don't want to say it's a different story because it's not, but it's a different setting. But the first film exists in this universe because the character of Buzz shows up, from that first movie, Kevin's horrible, horrible cousin Buzz. Devin Rattray shows up as Buzz McAllister, who is now a police officer, and he even references, oh yeah, like my brother, my brother or whatever got stuck home alone, and it was a hot mess and whatever. So because of that, we know that this is, the original movie exists in the continuity here. Okay, so it's more or less a sequel, I guess, but realistically, for all intents and purposes, it is for sure a remake, reboot, whatever you want to call it. Home Alone came out, the original, in a world where, VHS movies did not come out for home viewing for like a year. Like I remember Titanic was it was the biggest thing when it came out on video because, oh my God, we can relive the magic at home. Home Alone, the original movie, stayed in theaters for over a year. It was number one from mid-November when it premiered through February, the middle of February. So what, 3 months or something at number one, and that was a little more common back then for sure. But for a Christmas movie to be number one still in February, that doesn't make any sense, right? That is how enormous this movie was. The impact was huge. Everybody saw this movie. But because it's a holiday classic, it means kids now have seen this movie. Maybe they haven't seen the Goonies. Maybe they haven't seen the original Ghostbusters. Maybe they haven't seen Back to the Future. Okay. But this is a holiday classic. It plays around the clock on TV at Christmas time. Kids have seen this movie at this point in time, right? So I think this kid, Archie, is fine. He's no Macaulay Culkin. That was some magic there. You could see why he became an instantly huge star from this movie. Also, John Hughes, the classic. He wrote this thing. He knows how to wring some emotion. Okay. And Chris Columbus, he did the Harry Potter movies. He knows how to direct young children. We get none of that here. None of that exists in this movie. So the basic plot, I will say this. So Ellie Kemper and Rob Delaney play the burglars. And Rob Delaney's character had just lost his job, so they might have to sell the house. But they realize that they have this creepy doll that is worth $200,000 online. And they think that through an open house experience, Max Mercer, this young kid played by Archie Yates, stole the doll. And so they are like, we got to go after this kid. We got to get our money, we got to save our house, save our family. The parents, the Mercer family goes away to Tokyo, and they leave him behind. Now, I will say, there's a couple of positives I do have in this movie. Number one, I will admit, the method of leaving him at home does actually make sense. He's not having a great night at the house, so he steals away in the garage, in the car. He puts on some Looney Tunes, which I think is odd because this is a Disney production, but all right, fine. And so he's, laughing his head off at that, falls asleep, and they miscount him because they are ending up taking two different flights. They couldn't all fit in one flight this close to Christmas, so they're taking two different flights. So the dad thinks he's with the mom. Mom assumes that little Max is with the dad. So when they finally get to Tokyo, they realize, oh, where's Max? So, all right, that makes sense. Number two, he's too young to have a cell phone, and they don't have a landline because it's 2021. So he can't really call anybody. That all makes sense. They've only been living there 2 months, so they don't know any of the neighbors. That makes sense. Okay, that's kind of the only things, though, I sort of liked about this movie that were any different from the original. I liked sort of the method of getting him home alone in 2021. But everything else is almost, exactly, certainly the traps and stuff are almost exactly what Kevin did in the original Home Alone. A lot of the same gags are used. They've updated a few, but I only saw Home Alone 1 and 2. I never saw 3, and yes, there was a fourth. So they may have recycled gags from some of those too. I have no idea because I never had any interest in seeing another Home Alone movie. But one thing that is sorely missing from this is the heart. That first movie with, the weird old neighbor, we learn a little bit about his backstory. Brilliant, right? And so it really tugs at the heartstrings. Here, they attempt to do something similar, but it doesn't work at all. There were 2 times in this movie where I thought, okay, that's kind of a funny joke or a funny gag. But I was so, over this movie by that point, I couldn't even, I didn't even register any sort of, even a smile. I just made a mental note that, all right, that was kind of a good line. But that's how, not into this movie I was, that I was just so, oh my God, when is this going to be over? And in fact, it's shorter by about 15 minutes than the original, and it feels so much longer. They do that tired gag where they're sitting on the couch watching TV, and somebody's like, oh, why do they always have to remake classics? They're never as good as the original. Oh, ha, ha, ha. That joke has been made in 50 movies by this point that are being remade, the whole tongue-in-cheek thing. And when it works is when the movie is kind of, a little bit more tongue-in-cheek. 21 Jump Street, The Muppets, that kind of stuff. But this is not fourth wall breaking here. But even the tagline of this movie, which says, classics were made to be broken, I think indicates that even the creators and producers of this movie aren't really that behind it. Because it's broken all right. But they didn't break the original. They just broke this thing. If anything, it makes the original that much stronger by comparison. So, look, the tomatoes are really harsh on this movie. I think last I looked, it's at 12% critically, 9%, or maybe I'm reversing it. Maybe it's 21% critically, 9% audience. And no, granted, it's only been up about 12 hours by the time I'm recording this. So it's possible some people didn't even see the movie from the audience part, and they're just kind of, spamming the reviews on that. I can see that. But at the same time, I think it really speaks to how nobody wanted this movie. I've never spoken to one person, and I talk movies with a lot of people, and nobody seems at all interested or excited in this movie. In fact, a lot of the people I talked to straight out were just like, I'm not going to watch that. It serves no purpose. And even my nephews they don't care. And they've watched the original. I think the original still holds up so well that there's just zero reason to make this movie. A lot of remakes, okay, maybe in the sci-fi or action world, okay, the effects, are so much better now than they were 30 years ago. Let's remake, Total Recall, which that stunk too, but whatever. But let's try it. Or let's remake, or let's do a 5th or 6th Terminator movie because, okay, the technology's better now. But the whole basic premise of this movie is not based around technology at all. Yes, at one point he goes on the internet, and he goes, oh, show me your worst internet, and there's parental blocks on. So, okay, that's the end of that. And there's a couple of technology things, but for the most part, this movie is almost, cut and paste from the original, but everything is so much worse. The mom here, played by Aisling Bea. I don't know who she is, but she didn't really do anything for me in this movie. Catherine O'Hara in the original is so great. And we had that great exchange as she's coming home to find Kevin. She gets caught up with John Candy and the polka band. And, that's hilarious. This one, the biggest issue she has is she's on standby for the flight, but she gets the flight, and then the guy next to her, can't stop watching her TV screen that's in front of her. That's her biggest issue getting home. Come on. So nothing about this works. Let's just, leave it there. I did give those couple slight positives. I think, the method of getting him home alone, it makes sense here. And I will say Ellie Kemper, kind of has some decent physical comedy gags. Of course, we know they're all stunt doubles and stuff when she's, falling flat on her back and stuff like that. But whatever, she does okay with it. But this is one of those movies where you genuinely feel bad for everybody involved that they have to, go through this dreck. Nothing even happens for the first 45 minutes. So look, I could honestly rant another 10 minutes about this, but there's no real point. This for me is one of the worst of the year. I am failing it. It is a movie that just no one asked for, no one clearly wants. There's a few critics that are positive about it on the Rotten, but 20% is not very good. And I think as the days and weeks continue and more reviews keep coming in, it's only going to get worse. Because this is a stinker. The original and number 2, Lost in New York, are both, so good, almost near perfect Christmas movies. Why? Why are we messing with that? I couldn't tell you. I really couldn't. This is a stinko F all the way. So, all right, that will do it. After I watched it, I thought, well, man, I could just give that its own movie for sure and just rant and rant and rant. But look, I did watch Clifford, and I was like, it's kind of a nice dovetail. They're both, 2 big kids movies coming out the same week. So I lumped it in with Clifford, but it almost made me want to raise my Clifford grade. It's so bad, I almost was like, wow, C- isn't that high up from a D. Maybe Clifford deserves, better, but I'll keep it with the original C- I gave it when I watched it. But yeah, definitely I would recommend some of the earlier kids movies from the last few weeks. Paw Patrol was real cute. I thought My Little Pony was really cute on Netflix. And Ron's Gone Wrong. I loved Ron's Gone Wrong. That's in theaters now. I gave that a B, I think. Very funny stuff. So lots of other options for you this week in terms of family films. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.